Hello and welcome to the TPM podcast with Mario Gerard. Today I have a very interesting guest, Dhananjay Mahajan, with me. And he has over 25 years of working in tech and has a long career in Microsoft, over 20 years, I believe. He's worked as a lead engineer and as a program manager for 15 years. And over the past 5 years, he's been focused on program and product management. So would you like to introduce yourself, Dhananjay?
Yeah. Thanks, Mario. I'm really looking forward to this podcast. I've liked the podcast that you've done in the past. So, a pleasure and thanks for the opportunity. Dhananjay here. I'm a product manager, been doing product management for over 15 years now, called program management at Microsoft, product management in other companies. My primary focus started being a bit on the consumer side as I started working on Windows 95 and Windows Media, and then switched over pretty quickly into distributed systems and what's now called cloud computing. So I worked and released many products as a program manager as well as a lead software engineer, ranging from Windows, Azure, most recently .NET. And after that, I started working more on enterprise solutions and that are targeted towards IT operations and developers, what sometimes is called as DevOps, to help enterprise accelerate their cloud adoption. That's where I had the pleasure of working with Mario at Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. And most recently, I was the head of product at Heptio, a startup which recently got acquired, and we worked on making Kubernetes ubiquitous in the enterprises. So really looking forward to this discussion and the exchange of ideas on product management and program management with you, Mario.
Cool. So I think what we've kind of penned out for today is more, giving the program managers of the TPMs a flavor of what product management is all about, right? So what, in your opinion, is product management and how does it differ to program management?
Yeah, great question for the start. There are several similarities between both roles. And as you aptly noted, at Microsoft, it was called program manager. They still call it as program manager. And there are aspects of it which go into product management. The job of a product manager in the purest sense is to discover a service or offering that is usable, of value to the customer, and is feasible, something that can be delivered as a package service. It is I look at that role really as having a three-pronged approach. One is having a customer or user empathy. The second one is having a good sense of technology and technical aspects that make it accessible to the customer. And then the third aspect is business acumen. And so those three things meld together to make a product manager. So let me go into a few examples of how those interact. From a customer empathy standpoint, a product manager has to understand and own the entire customer experience. How the technology that you're providing impacts, does it provide value to the customer? Understand the customer journey. It involves activities like talking to customer, understanding what they want or translating that into needs, as we call it. And then coming up and helping the team understand what is the minimum viable product or what's the minimum lovable product which customers would like.
So basically, you're the voice of the customer, right? You are putting yourself in the customer's shoes, and you are the voice of the customer,
Yes.
And you're trying to make sure that whatever you deliver is going to be used by the customer.
Exactly. And I like that voice of the customer to translate also with my engineering teams so that they can start understanding it. So I look at myself as the first voice who understands the customer, translates it, but I want all my engineering teams also to understand and start becoming an echo that voice.
So a couple of things that you just brought up, right? One is talk to the customers. In my previous roles, I've had product managers who do like surveys, right? They do surveys with different customers, understand what the needs are, or you do some kind of focus groups and you figure out whether that's what the customer wants, or you've already identified a segment of the market and you're going after that particular segment. and then you're basically trying to see what that segment actually exactly wants.
Yeah.
Because sometimes we, as product managers, right, you think the customer wants X, but actually he wants Y.
Yes.
And that's the most, I think, difficult job of the product manager, to articulate that very clearly and make sure that what you're being the voice of the customer is very, very critical.
Yes.
Right. And I also think one other thing is that you got to get that right.
Yes.
Exactly. And I think that's why I personally have never moved to the product management side, is because if you get it wrong, you might spend like a year or 6 months or 8 months with a dev team of 20, 30 people maybe.
Yeah.
And you build something out and the product doesn't fly after that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And that's you're bringing up a very interesting and important point, Mario, is understanding what is the minimum lovable product for the customer is important. And you're getting into some discussion we may have later on, which is the difference between the newer agile model, which is more iterative, to the waterfall model, where I've worked on products which I worked on for 2-3 years and then released it to customers, and then found that customers didn't want that. Right? So talking to the customers is important, and that could be through, like you said, surveys. But what I like to also do is that echo effect. So not only do I do surveys, not only do I have my teams get involved in a customer engagement program where we are constantly iterating and talking to customers, but I also leverage my field, my sales and services teams who are constantly engaging with customers to also become the voice of the customer. So I'm in constant touch with what the customer needs are. And in the recent, changes that are happening in disruptive markets, those things change a lot. Which brings me to the second point, which you made, which was very apt, which is customers will ask you for one thing as what they want, but what they need is different from what they want. And I'll tell you an example. When I was working on a product which was a cloud platform broker, which simplified deploying applications into the cloud for enterprises, whichever cloud they wanted to go, whether they wanted to do AWS or they wanted to do Azure or Google Cloud or even Oracle Cloud, right? And they kept asking me like, hey, make this simpler, make this simpler. So I was focused on making things simpler. But what ended up happening is the simplicity caused a side effect where there was a sprawl of all these cloud resources being used. And it showed up in the customer's bill. This was back in 2014, right? So customers, I started chasing down what customers were asking me to do, which is simplify them consuming the cloud, which was great for cloud providers. But what ended up happening is that they got these huge bills and they were shocked. And that caused a negative effect in them stopping working with the cloud. So what they wanted was not just simplicity, but also controls and sort of a targeted way to make sure that they're not overspending on the cloud. So after having realized that, and that came through because of the customer interaction, is that the customer said, wow, we went from being able to deploy 100 VM resources to the cloud to now I'm getting 6,000 a month. And I don't know where these 6,000 are coming because you made it push button simple to deploy them, right? So I think it's a very important point to keep in mind. As we make those lovable products, we want to make sure that they don't become hateable products, even if they are viable. And keeping an eye on what customers want, but also keeping on what they need. So as you make things simpler to do, you want to also make sure that they have proper controls in place, especially enterprise products, so that it doesn't get out of control.
And you also spoke about the minimum viable product or the minimum lovable product, right? How do you decide where that kind of...
Yes.
Is it like 6 months, or is it going to be 8 months, or is it like it's in terms of features? You can either look at it in terms of features or the term of time, right?
Yeah.
And how do you draw that line? Do you have any, like, if you can say it like 2-3 lines on how?
Yeah. So that is always an art,
Yeah.
and there is no simple
Science to it,
formula.
yeah.
There is a bit of
Experience.
science. There's experience that you bring in, and it all goes down to understanding the customer,
Yeah.
understanding the business you are in, making sure that you're aligning your product offering with the vision, with the brand that you've created,
Yeah.
and making sure that you have metrics and controls to validate what you're doing in an iterative fashion.
Yeah.
So let me go on the understanding the customer. It's important to understand, are you solving what they're asking you to do, or really identifying the problem under the covers?
Yeah.
That's what takes the experienced product manager to not just ask, would you like to use feature X versus Y, but really understand what problem customers are facing. Secondly, it is important to understand, are you solving a problem that's pervasive and something that the customer is willing to pay? So their customers will tell you all kinds of problems. And especially you brought up a good point of segmenting your customers and looking after different segments. I've got one extreme of customer asking me to do X and another customer asking me to do Y.
Yeah.
And you have limited resources and time to do.
Exactly.
Would you pick X over Y? That's where you want to decide, are these customers aligned with the target market you're going after?
Yeah.
And sometimes you may make some customers unhappy.
Yeah.
Right? And so if they are in your target market, are you solving the real problems that they want? I'll give you another example. We had a backup product that would back up clusters. It was well liked by the developers who already had clusters set up in their own private test environments, and with a push button, they could back it up. When we went to the operations users of that product, they were barely setting up clusters with those controls. Developers didn't want controls. The operations folks wanted controls. They didn't care the operations folks didn't care about a backup product. They're like, I don't even have a cluster to back up. Focusing on enabling them, and they are the buyers, right? I mean, developers are the ones who are testing it out, but the buyers are the operations folks. Enabling the operations folks is going to see much more acceleration in an enterprise product where you're targeting first to enable them to set up several clusters and then back it up. So those are kind of examples that help you understand, are you focused on the right problem? Second thing is it pervasive? Is that something that they are facing right now? And are you providing sufficient value that they're willing to pay for it if you have a paid product? Got it. Second thing you want to do, the third thing you want to do is make sure you have constant engagement with both these various customer segments, and you're collecting feedback on an ongoing So don't wait for your entire product to be ready and then push it out. I have had an engagement program where I had some trusted partners, customers that I worked with. I would even show them prototypes that my UX team had built. We had not even created code out of it.
And just mock prototypes.
Just mock prototypes and then get their feedback. And it will be amazing what you'll learn from this, right? So making sure that that's happening. And once customers deploy your products, have an active, especially in the cloud world, one of the benefits that we had even working on Oracle Cloud is with the consent of the customer, we could actually track how customers are using the product. You have to actively instrument the product to be able to collect the metrics. So important to keep in mind that as you build the product, make sure you instrument the product in such a way that you can collect usage metrics, analyze them, and then the reality is what customers are using versus what they're telling you. If you do these things, you will make sure that you are using your engineering resources, your sales resources in the most effective manner and tracking towards an MVP. And sometimes you'll have to make some wild guesses and bets, but validating that with the follow-up really helps you rein it in.
So you spoke a lot about B2C. I come from a you spoke about B2B, right? I come from a B2C market. And one of the best things I think we did was use something like Amplitude and Mixpanel, where basically those are built into your app, and it actually tracks what a user actually does.
Nice.
So supposing you take a user session, a user's on any app, Facebook or anything, you then see every button he clicks, and can you do it across like hundreds of thousands of users and see whether they're loving that new feature you just launched or they're not loving it. And then if they're loving it, you go and you invest more to make it more durable, make it more scalable, and add more features to that particular new feature you already added. And then come back and reiterate to see if it's actually doing well. And that's why you see a lot of Google does this, right, where they launch beta programs. And Google is probably on the extreme where they launch a beta for like many years. Like, I think Gmail was on beta for a long time, right? But they're trying to test and make sure that it works really well. So cool. And then you were going to the other thing, right? Tech. We started with what is product management, and we got sidetracked a little bit because of me.
No, but it was an interesting conversation. Do product managers have to be technical?
Yeah.
I think it depends on the product. On one end, we have companies like Mario, you and I have worked on, which are, cloud and distributed computing, and your customers are fairly technical. They're either developer or IT operations folks or architects or working on the cloud. And technical aspects help a lot. And then you have certain other products where I've never worked at Apple, but I've heard that Apple actually employs non-technical people without a technology background to design their products so that they're more user-friendly for the non-techie folks. Right? But I feel like, especially in the area that we are working on, technology, even for consumer products, helps a product manager in these following aspects. One is you have to win a lot of credibility with your engineering teams. And having a technical background, and I've been a developer in the past, helps me have empathy towards what my engineering cost is going to be, what my engineers are going to go through. I may not be having a full understanding of the implementation, but when a customer asks me, can you do X? A customer is like a kid in a candy shop, and they may ask all kinds of requirements. Having that technical background helps me translate that customer and business requirement to what the technical requirements would be, and also get additional details from the customer, from sales teams, from field, so that I'm armed with all the data we need to make the prioritization decisions. Because ultimately, the priority of what you will build for MVP not only rests on fixing the pervasive problem, but also understanding what the cost of the problem is. If the problem is pervasive, has great value for the customer, but the cost is so high that you'll be working on it for the next 3 years, you may have lost the opportunity because the market has moved on. Your other products, competition would have moved in and taken that. So you want to work on fixing the features or prioritizing the features that have highest impact and sort of lowest cost, highest impact on the value for the customer, and lowest engineering cost or resource cost, customer acquisition cost. And so the technical background helps me. And thirdly, often product managers get involved in doing proof of concepts. So if I have a developer customer target, then writing a simple piece of code or an app actually helps me understand my customer better. And also helping my engineering team better.
So recently what happened was, so Amazon was the first company, I think, which launched the TPM as a role, technical program managers. And now if you look at Amazon's actually launched the PMT, which is a product manager technical. That's a new role which they've launched, I think, the last 3-4 years. And you see more and more people who are moving to the PMT role because one is because it's because of AWS. Because AWS is, again, going back, your customers are your developers. And a product manager who's building, say, a database as a service is going to be really, really a hardcore database engineer who knows ins and outs of the database to actually be a product manager on the database side. And then it's slowly kind of moving to other areas as well, where product managers need to know the intricate workings. Supposing you're doing an API platform, right? Or an SDK for customers. You need to know what the customer's needs are. And most of the time, those needs are very technical.
Yes.
So I think there's a difference between being a B2C, maybe like something like Facebook, you're doing something very front end,
Yes.
right? They could be back end PMTs, but front end PMs are not necessarily technical. They're more like a customer's voice, as you said, right? But when the customer's voice and the customer himself is a developer or the development community, then you need to really be on the technical side.
Yeah. Yeah, that's generally true. Though I'll also tell you from my background of working on Windows Media Player.
Yeah.
And we were building a new format.
Yeah.
This was back in early
new
2000s.
New encoding format.
New encoding format. And it was important to understand how we can protect digital content, yet make it simpler for the end user to use it. And I think these were the early days of piracy. MP3 and piracy and so on. And one of the bad things which we did is have an engineering mind design digital rights or
DMCA,
which made it hard for a customer to use it, right? So I feel like sometimes even you need to have a good balance of between the two, even for consumer facing in certain areas.
That makes sense. And the next one you were talking about was the business acumen, right?
Yeah. So more and more now that you brought up, PM technical being a role at Amazon.
Yeah.
More and more companies are looking at product managers, which is a hard role because you have to wear several hats. Also understand the business and own the business. At the startup that I was working at, we expected product managers almost to be like business owners who are driving the business, not just doing the technology side of it. So they own the P&L, they own making sure that you have ARR or annual recurring revenue, and that is measured as part of the overall scorecard for whether a product is successful or not. And this is especially important for smaller organizations, startups that are moving into a disruptive market.
Cool.
And that's why having that business acumen is required. Understanding how you can take a product roadmap and yet accomplish your business goals, not just do technology for technology's sake, what we used to call as building honest technology. Will this not only bring value to solving a customer problem, but also is the customer willing to pay for it?
Yeah.
Is an important aspect. And if you don't get that as a product manager, if you don't own the revenue generation, pricing, go to market, how you'll help with the sales team, then you end up building products which are more, just because they're fancy technology gadgets than something that's solving a problem that customers will pay for.
Yeah. I recently wrote a blog because I recently met a person who at Amazon, and I was like, what are you doing? So he was a product manager for a long time at Amazon. And then he picked up a new role where the title of the role is a single-threaded leader. I don't know if you've heard of this. So at Amazon, they're launching these new startups within an organization.
Yes.
Right? So he basically owns, I don't want to talk about the product exactly, but he owns something where he owns the entire P&L within a larger part of a team. There's a team of 1,000 developers, 1,000 people team. It's a fairly mature product, but they see an initiative where there's a third party outside Amazon actually trying to do something. They say, hey, why is he doing it? Why don't we do it? Right? So it's kind of a POC. You have 1 year maybe to go and launch that. You're given a budget and a P&L, and he basically works, and his whole thought is to just launch that particular product within a product, right? It's an independent entity, but which will help the bigger product. And it's called as a single-threaded leader. And he's a product manager. And then he slowly moved to this more senior, I think it's a more senior role, where you own end-to-end. You're allowed to hire your own team. And then you go and develop. It's a very singular goal. The product PMTs have, none of the PMTs, the single-threaded owners have a very singular goal. Go launch this in X amount of time, and you're given X amount of dollars to go do that.
Yeah.
So that's something which you're talking about, the business acumen, product knowledge, to go do something like that.
Yeah. And that's also a trend I saw in my final years at Microsoft. And I've heard since leaving Microsoft that's become even more, is that basically I was a partner program manager, not a product manager, working with partners of
Yeah.
Microsoft to promote Microsoft Cloud.
Yeah.
And I was given, I won't name the value, but a budget to go pick my partner, the solutions,
Yeah.
and drive up adoption of Microsoft Cloud with certain metrics around it.
And
that was the most rewarding experience.
Yes,
One of the
because you're given a free hand.
Yeah.
The organization 100% trusts you.
Yeah.
It's all the decisions are yours.
Yeah.
Right. You basically are given a problem to solve, and they don't care how you solve it. Of course, you're having like quarterly or monthly meetings with the senior management, telling them how you're doing. But basically, you own that entire space, end to end. Right. You pick your own customers. You have your own budget, and you're trying to do X or Y. So it's a very, as I said, it's very, as you said, it's very, very rewarding.
Yeah.
So cool. Let's talk a little bit about how product management differs in an agile versus a more traditional. And I think you worked on both sides, right? You worked on the agile side of the world, and you also worked on, I think you just mentioned like 2 years to do a product sometimes, right?
Yeah.
And how does that differ?
Yeah. I mean, I've been on, there is a difference between working on a platform, an operating system, which, is prolific and being used by thousands and millions of customers out there, and making one change could impact, even if it's 1%, a large number of customers, right? And and even in traditional days, making that one change, like I'm sure how they design, and I worked on a NASA project too, the Cassini space mission. Everything was in a waterfall model where everything was tested to the nth degree, spec to the nth degree before it was even handed off to the engineering team, right? Things have changed now. It's much more of an agile model where you try something out as an experiment. If it sticks, it sticks.
Yeah.
You'll have a few failures, and there's
it's about failing fast.
It's about failing fast, exactly. And that's where I think product management, being the role that leads the organization into the change, has to be most adept at, that agile development. And that doesn't mean just knowing Scrum and new agile methodologies, but really understanding that you are not going to just build the final spec, wrap it up and hand it off to engineering and not see it until it's all done. But you're going to be more involved in the day-to-day process of understanding requirements, helping engineering translate it, be collaborative with field, sales, engineering, customers, and marketing, be in an iterative cycle where you're actually coming up with the minimum viable or usable product and releasing it, validating it, and then failing fast, like you said, using the feedback that comes from customers to make sure that you're not going down a path which is going to create a product which is not going to be usable. But it's kind of like what in one of my organizations we would call it as, let's build a skateboard, then we'll build a cycle, and then we'll build a car, and then we'll build a plane. Now, if you look at the skateboard, nobody will predict you are trying to build a plane in the long term, right? But you start with whatever is minimal that can be quickly tested. And your customer, all they want to do is move from point A to point B. And they're not looking for flying a plane. Maybe eventually they will want to go across the continents, and then you build the plane. So having that agile mindset, focusing on the MVP and continuous improvement is really important. And with Scrum becoming more popular, it has really given rise to that product owner, product manager, and TPM and product managers working together in a collaborative environment to do this in an iterative fashion, so that you can be more agile. And that makes you, I feel, more customer focused. Like I mentioned to you, I've been on products in the past where we were heads down building what we had spec'd, and then didn't see the customers for a year, 2 years, and then found out that customers didn't want us to solve the problem, right? That's gone. So this agile methodology and this new model is definitely making us more customer focused.
So I see that Agile's really taken off, where you have a B2C product where it's like, it's an app or something like that. It's a website, an application on your phone. Do you see it change in the enterprise space as well?
Absolutely. Even at Oracle, as well as in my startup more recently, because that's my experience. And even prior to that, as I was building a cloud broker, we engage with customers on a regular basis.
Got it.
Now, true that the buying cycles in enterprises are
Much
lot
longer.
slower. They're much longer.
Yeah.
So customers will be on a trial period much longer.
Yep.
But you have more interaction with the customer. You know the customers. You can segment them. You can group them. So Agile is done just a bit differently. And by the way, when I say Agile, doesn't mean I'm expecting everyone to go get Agile certification.
Yeah.
In fact, I've not found a single team I worked at which used Agile to the spec I got trained on, right? So with enterprises, it's a flavor of Agile.
Yeah.
With enterprises, what I typically do is come up with the top 2 or 3 problems customers have to solve, build an end-to-end scenario which is usable for the customer, and then present that idea before we start working on it through a prototype to the customer, get their feedback, work on it. And even if it's not completely done, I have a trusted customer group which I may release beta to. So the cloud offers a great opportunity for enterprises to have small teams where I can release features and do A/B testing, for example.
Yeah.
Having those capabilities makes Agile possible even in the B2B product world.
Yeah. So in the Agile, I was talking to somebody at LinkedIn a couple of months ago, and I think they were saying at any given point in time, the LinkedIn app, the LinkedIn mobile app, is running 600 to 800 A/B tests.
Wow!
Right. Just think about that. There are 6 to 8, and they have a very beautiful way to segment customers. So they can launch an A/B test just in India, for example, or they can launch A/B testing for a particular segment of customers, right? And they just see, how is it doing for that particular segment, or how is it doing in this particular market? And that is the beauty of Agile, right? Because you can go in, you can release something for 1% of your population, and then see how it does, and then you can roll it out or roll it back if it doesn't meet the target metrics, right? Correct. You say, this is what I want. I want engagement to go up. I want DAU, daily active usage, to go up, right? So you have a certain metric and you're trying to hit that metric. And if the metric is defined before the product is started and launched, then when you launch it to 5% of your audience or 2% of your audience, you actually can go back and measure it and say, hey, this is what I did. This is the outcome. And because of the outcome, I think we should launch it and make it a more wider, go to a wider audience. And the trial and error, right, to do that is the beauty of Agile. I feel especially in the B2C market, you have to have the A/B testing framework built into your product. And we spoke about metrics and collecting the usage, right? It has to be there, because without that, you cannot move forward. There's no way of knowing whether your customers are going to love it or not. And to launch it to the entire population set does not make any sense, because then you can't roll it back easily.
Right. So in the B2C market, if you don't mind me asking you a question, you're collecting some metrics from the back end. Do you actually actively engage in direct customer feedback? So
that's what, if you look at product managers in the B2C space, they do the focus groups. You said trusted partners is one way of enterprises doing it. The B2C does it with focus groups, where you have like XY, focus groups in this particular region or this particular geography or something like that. And then that's before you even go into the product definition phase. So it starts with the focus groups, and then once you start defining it, then you send out surveys to a large group of your customers who have opted in to do some surveys for you, and then you start building it, and then you do the A/B testing over a period of time, right? So it's I think Scrum, as you said, Scrum, Agile, or whatever you want to call it, is more of a framework. I think the framework has reached a point of maturity where you have a lot of other things which a lot of people don't talk about, right? If you're looking at agile product managers at companies like Facebook or LinkedIn, or where they have millions of users, you see that you have to be at this cadence where you're defining your features properly, you're talking to your customers, even if it's a smaller set, and then you start launching it into the market with a small controlled population set. Because if you have 100 different features, nobody's going to like it. Your app is going to look, busy, and nobody's going to use anything, right? So it's a continuous A/B testing, and I see that companies like even Amazon, they do a lot of A/B testing. Facebook actually launches, something new, like a code drop, every 2 hours or every hour. You just don't realize it because it's maybe just a color change in one small button, which somebody thought, okay, that might change things, or it could be a small feature somewhere which which a small percentage of people use, right? So it's very interesting that way. Hi, folks. Thanks for listening, and I really hope you enjoyed that. I've had to edit this podcast in 3 parts. So this is the end of part 1. Parts 2 and 3 have already been published, so please do listen in.